Welcome to Floyd Street's Finest. He is former Louisville assistant Mark Lieberman. I am Jack Grossman, Floyd Street's Finest, part of the Field of 68 podcast network, presented by Title Boxing, where Coach Lieberman gets fit, where I should probably get fit when I'm back in Louisville. First class is free, located at 849 South Hurstbourne Parkway. You can call them at 502-630-0600 to get your first class there. It's free. Title Boxing. Also presented by Kentucky Branded, place to get your Louisville merch. If any BBNs listen today, could be some hate watching, some good old fashioned hate watching today with how it went against Duke for the Cardinals on Monday. They got Kentucky gear as well, Kentucky Derby stuff, all that fun, good stuff there. Coach, first of all, I kind of missed most of it. We're down here in Atlanta. It's in like the 20s and 30s. It's dry, no snow. Honestly, a friend of mine and I debated driving up to Cameron Indoor on Monday night because of one, that's just a bucket list place for me, but two, I was like, well, the roads aren't bad here. We kind of looked up, it was pretty bad up in the Durham Raleigh area. We were like, yeah, we'll pass on that, probably for the best considering how the game went. But how you guys been holding up there with the snow and all the weather up there?
Jack, are you a Star Wars fan in any capacity?
I
Empire
played
Strikes Back?
I played the Lego Star Wars video game as a kid.
Well, I would
That's
just
the most
tell
I
you,
got.
this is very reminiscent of Hoth, the planet in Empire Strikes Back. I have my Tauntaun, which some of our listeners will understand that reference, and there's Imperial probe droids outside. This is not my kind of climate, having grown up mostly in South Florida. So it took me about 30 minutes to get out of the parking lot today, which was better than yesterday, which took me about 45. Other than that, Jack, I'm in the cozy confines of Chateau Lieberman, and ready to just, I would say, talk basketball with you. Unfortunately, not the game that people were hoping for, and obviously a disturbing trend for the way Louisville has played against some of the top tier teams.
Yeah, I would say that's the top one. First of all, glad you guys got power. You're all good. Most of the family that I've talked to back home, they've been good. I know my parents got a generator in case they lost power. I was like, good. Knowing Louisville, probably about 15 years too late on that, but better late than never on that front. But yeah, everyone because of that, everyone got to see the obliteration that was Duke blasting Louisville by 31 yesterday. Louisville led that game 25-24 with 4.5 minutes left in the first half. The rest of the way, Duke outscored them 59-27.
But Jack, wasn't it, as you're watching that game, it was like, look, Commonwealth's hitting some tough shots. They got a couple transition baskets. But when you're watching the game, you can just see the ebbs and flow with ease. You and I texted early on, Duke is getting paint touch after paint touch, making great shots, defending. You knew it was a situation where it was so hard for Louisville to score and to stop Duke. Duke was almost stopping themselves. They were missing some good shots and had some slippage and some turnovers, but it was almost like, okay, you could see that where it was trending again towards where Duke could just open up that lead, and certainly did it at the half.
Yeah, I mean, everything Louisville was doing looked so much more difficult, even when they were making some shots in the first half. And Duke, I mean, you brought it up. Looking at the start of that game, what's it go? Open three, layup, open three, layup. I mean, that's not a good omen there when you're going your first 6, 7, 8 possessions and you're giving up easy, wide open shots. That's an issue. The other thing is, and you mentioned it, Duke had some slippage. Louisville played some of their better defense of the year, but again, I agree. Duke, I think it was mostly Duke had slippage in the middle of the first half. Louisville has a 7-minute and 14-second scoring drought, and they only give up 4 points in that stretch. If you would have told me that Louisville held Duke to 4 points in a 7-minute, 14-second stretch, I would have said, okay, Louisville has to take advantage of this. And that's where you need a kill shot. That's where you need like an 8, 10, 12 nothing run to really surge and seize control of this game. Duke gave you that opportunity to put some real game pressure on them. And because Louisville was unable to get anything going on the offensive end and were really bullied by Duke on both ends of the floor most of this game, that's where you couldn't take advantage of when you played some better defense, but Duke opened the door for you. it kind of felt like even when Louisville was getting stops, like, okay, this doesn't feel sustainable on the defensive end based off of what happened early in the game. And you figured Duke was going to get rolling again at some point, which is what happened into the first half and especially into the second half.
Yeah, it just nothing came easy against the length and the athleticism of Duke. Nothing was easy. Even when they switched, they couldn't take advantage of that and couldn't get past the bigger defenders. And because for people to understand, when you're that long and you're that athletic, those gaps are shrunk. Now, it's a different philosophy. When Coach K coached, it was really they denied. They were basically forcing you, hey, you got to beat this guy, but you're not going to get a lot of help. We're just going to make it almost a one-on-one situation, where the philosophy of Duke's defense has really turned into where they're very unselfish on the defensive end. You can see the rotations. You can see the gap shrinkage. You can see where they're just containing and not allowing splits. Their bigs come over. And that's another issue, Jack. When you don't have bigs that are scorers around the rim, bigs are able to give more help. They're able to push up that line where they're not allowing a Woolley or a Comwell or Mikel. Just there's always going to be traffic. There's going to be congestion because those bigs are if it's dumped down, they're not worried about those guys going up with violence and scoring. It's more of those guys are facilitators and passers. And so it's almost like a non-threat. They're almost daring you to score in the post. And that really makes it pressure when you see a big almost 2 feet up the line instead of where traditionally bigs are almost attached because they're so worried about a big scoring. And honestly, watching that and reviewing the film, it really is. You could see a tail of tape where the guards for Louisville really don't have a lot of room to operate because as soon as they get by somebody, there's a big to wall up.
Yeah, how many times did we see Mikel Brown get into the paint but not be able to finish?
Mm-hmm.
And how many times did we see, off the top of my head, I think Frew missed 3 layups in the first half alone on Monday night. It's when you don't have to respect a Frew or a Khalifa or a Zugris down low, that makes it so much easier to guard everything else. And a lot of this has been like most of my worries about Louisville have been on the defensive end this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I still think that's the biggest thing that's going to hold them back. And we saw that, especially in this Duke game as well. This is the first time, and this has to do a lot with Duke, obviously, for everything you said, for how good defensively they are, how athletic they are. There's just not many teams like that in college basketball. I mean, maybe Arizona, Michigan, that might be it
Mm-hmm.
on that front. But when you go up against a team like that and they're able to throw guys at a Mikel Brown, at a Conwell, at a Woolley when they drive to the bucket, they're able to defend without fouling. They're able to make finishes so difficult. That's where you need Frew to be able to go up and finish strong. You need Khalifa to be able to go up and finish strong. And Monday night, especially, that just wasn't the case at all.
No, and I'm just looking at numbers as you're going through that, and it really is tough. If you don't have a post presence and you don't have guys that you know you can finish, it also goes hand in hand with guards not trusting to make that pass. They're not looking to throw the ball in because they're worried about, okay, this is not really a threat. My guy's not going to dig. You don't have guys digging. You don't have trapping. You don't have those type of situations where there's not a lot of freedom, and that makes it a tougher post pass as well. And what that does, that runs down the shot clock because the post is not going to make a move. And now you've got to scramble and really cut hard to get the ball back. And now you're talking about going from 10 or 11 on the shot clock to 4 or 5, and then you really got to force up a tough shot. So it really is a frustrating situation where, this is look, Khalifa is a heck of a passer. He's a heck of a guy, a facilitator, but he's not going to score around the basket. And with Frew and Zugris, those guys just aren't comfortable making those post moves consistently. There's going to be some here and there, but, and that's the issue right now. And so, people are expecting adjustments. People are, I was listening to the 93.9 today, and everybody's saying, well, Coach Kelsey doesn't adjust to this and that. It's really not a matter of adjusting. It's a matter of, look, you have players. This is what you have. You've got to figure out how you could put these guys to be in position to be more successful.
Yeah, the other thing I'd add on top of that is when you don't have to worry so much about the big man, you're not going to help off the shooters. When a guy gets into
Exactly.
the lane, I mean, you can
Uh-huh.
trust the big guy to step up, cut off a Brown or a Conwell, whoever it is, and that you're not really worried about Frew beating you. You're not really worried
Yeah.
about Khalifa. But
You
because
watch
I've
that
seen,
first game,
yeah.
right, Jack? And we go back to that first game, that first half. They're going under screens. They're playing off. They're not really pressuring. And Louisville was able. Look, when you're not being pressured, you have freedom of movement. You can sit there. You can survey everything. You can analyze everything that's happening on the floor. But what Duke's extending their pressure like they did in the second half of the first contest, it carried over to this one as well.
The other thing I'd add too is I saw this a lot on Twitter. Louisville needs a back to the basket post up guy,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, sure, that would it be helpful to have Trey Kaufman Wren on the roster? Probably. I mean, the dude, even though he struggled a little bit lately, the dude's a hell of a player. Would it be helpful to have Montrezl Harrell on the block? Of course, but
There's a
but
judge in town that maybe we can talk to see if we can get some eligibility.
yeah, get a donor. Maybe you think Derwin Webb's gonna?
That's what I was thinking of. Call Judge Webb and say, "Hey, let's get
Let's get
another restraining
Montrez
order
back on the floor.
and see if we can get Gorgie to come back out."
Yeah, but I bring that up because what Louisville's not trying to accomplish. If Louisville is going to a post up in an offensive possession, the defense has already won. Like that's not what Louisville wants. That they want to play with pace. They want to get layups, dunks, 3-point shots.
Mm-hmm.
A traditional post up is analytically not a great play, and that's not what Pat Kelsey wants. I'm not saying the post up set. Obviously, we see teams like Purdue and Matt Painter still get a lot out of it. Arizona, Michigan, Florida. You could get. I mean, Duke obviously with Cam Boozer, Carolina as well. You can get offense out of that, but that's not what a lot of these teams want all the time. And Louisville throws in that scenario. I think it's more of you need someone who can just be a lob threat, finish around the rim, and just be strong going up because you're getting shots created for you. You just have to go up strong and take advantage of it. It's less
No
of I need
doubt.
to create my own shot out of a post up. It's more they've already created everything for me. I just got to go up strong and finish.
No doubt. And you said it, like it's not their first actions are coming down and they're looking for early offense. They're looking for back cuts. They're looking for a drive and a kick out for an open three. They're looking for ball reversal to scramble and drive for a layup or drive for another kick out. And if they've exhausted some things, then there might be a play out of the post. But when it goes into the post, there's split actions. There's guys cutting. There's back screens. There's fades. There's pin that where they're trying to occupy guys to get open shots. And those guys aren't thinking shot first. They're thinking pass first. So when that happens, and this is the roster that they constructed building to that type of offense. And early in the year, look, we expected those guys to be a little more dominant from a guard position. These guys can get out and go with Mikel and Mikel and what they had. And obviously right now it's just a situation where, you construct that roster, Jack, and you're hopeful that the pieces you put together, just like we see pro teams when they draft players, they're expecting them to fit in the slots. And right now, it isn't exactly what they envisioned. And then you have Case and Pryor, who was hoping to be an X factor, and obviously there's something there that he's just not right. And using his athleticism and his length is not even a non-starter at this point.
Yeah, and Kenai Roots has been out for 2.5 weeks as well
Sure.
because of the illness thing. And to me, so much of it goes back to we talked about this about a little over a month ago, right after the Tennessee game. We had the discussion of why is McNeely guarding Ahmed, and it's like, well, you don't trust Kenai Roots, and Pryor can't get off the bench. The pivot was supposed to be you play those two guys at the 4, then you can slide Hadley down to the 3. When Kenai Roots, even before he was sick, hadn't been a guy that had performed well in big games, hadn't earned PK's trust yet. And Kason Pryor, I mean, it was never the plan to be playing Zugris. And no offense to Zugris. I thought he actually did some really good things, especially initially on the defensive end on Monday night. But it was never the plan to be playing Zugris instead of Pryor. That wasn't
Right.
how this was supposed to go.
Look,
And
he's a physical guy. He's just,
yeah.
he's not going to be able to. He plays underneath the rim. He's not going to be able to score. So there's that factor as well.
Yeah, and then you're playing Frew and Khalifa together, which I like that combo. But when you're so thin everywhere else, You're exposing a lot to potential foul trouble. You're asking one of those two guys to defend dudes away from the bucket. There's some issues, especially on the defensive end, when you do that for long stretches, and the foul trouble probably being the biggest one, as we saw on Monday night. But so much of it was pinned on Roots is going to take this big jump, and Pryor is going to come back from the injury and be the guy who he was at South Florida and he was at times early on last season for Louisville. And that just flat out hasn't happened. And we're sitting here on January 27th, and we sat there last month and said there's time for this to change. There's still time. It's not, the season's not over yet, but to use a John Calipariism, you're running out of real estate on the runway. Like, you're getting pretty close here. You're getting pretty close to being a finished product. If you're Louisville, and that to me is just not getting the production out of those two guys has just handcuffed Pat Kelsey. You could say, well, he should have gone out and paid Nate Amen, or he should have gone out and paid Baba Miller, or whatever. But you can't go back and reverse that now. So unless Derwin Webb's going to get Montrezl Harrell out of the
don't
portal,
be so sure that there's not ways to get players. But no, I and all kidding aside, yeah, this is the roster they constructed. Yeah. And look, it's an art, not a science, when you're putting together rosters and you see fits. And look, McNeely, who I think is really good off the ball defensively. Obviously, when he has room, he's a tremendous shooter. Trying to run him off some wide pin downs, but the length you saw of Duke just bothers him. And you saw that time when, you even have Evans, just a mid-range shot with a crossover, is able to shoot over these guys, and they're able to shoot over the guards that Louisville has. And that's an issue, where even these closeouts and they're in great basketball position when you have a 6'8" shooter, 6'7", 6'8" shooter with a 6'2", 6'3" guy closing out, it makes a difference.
Yeah, and to your point, everyone keeps wanting these massive adjustments and all that stuff. At this point, we haven't seen it. I don't see why we would start seeing something like a zone on defense or something like that. But the roster's the roster. You did see them play Fru and Khalifa together some on Monday night. Mm-hmm. That is an adjustment. But there's just not really, I guess that's my grand point here. There's not really, and you've said this as well, there's not really a whole lot schematically you can change. It's just, you got to play better at what you're doing than what than what they did right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, look, and that's the thing, Jack. Everybody, when you hear the term adjustments, and sometimes everybody expects at halftime that there's going to be a plethora of completely new schemes and whatnot. And I think I went over with you what happens at halftime. And you've heard Peyton Manning talk about halftime adjustments. He says he has a slice of, he eats orange slices, and he walks around, goes to the bathroom, and is ready to head back out. But in all seriousness, adjustments are little things. Hey, on these pin downs, they're really curling it. Let's make sure we get our defenders loose, because that big's not a threat. He's going to step out, be ready for a dribble handoff. Let's make sure we're doing a better job of tagging and rotating. We've got to be a better job of scrambling out of these positions. We got to, we're giving up transition baskets. It's more about doing those things that there's little things that you'll do in the game that will affect what the other team's doing, but it really isn't a major force of things. It comes down to your personnel. What personnel do you have, and is your personnel able to do the things that you want to do against what you're playing against? And right now, you're in a situation where the personnel for the top tier teams that Louisville has faced seem to have better athletes and are just able to do what they want, dictate the tempo, dictate the pace of play, and dictate what's going to happen in the game. And Louisville just seems to be reeling in these games.
What can Louisville do to dictate more of those types of things, to make sure they're playing the pace they want to play at, getting up and down more, and doing more to try to fight that athleticism, that disadvantage that they have, especially in the front court?
Yeah, it just little things, just a technical standpoint, just, maybe you're going to do, and again, it's tough against some of the posts that are playing against, just getting the bigs to give early help, how you're guarding the perimeter, almost make guys shoot contested tough threes and tough twos, rather than sometimes you're seeing them where they're just scrambling to get to a guy and he's in a position to stampede and just come downhill, where you've just got to, hey, we got to control it, keep guys in front of us. And that's, it sounds like, simplistic, but, technique wise, making shoulders are you're behind your knees, that you're closing out, you're choppy on your steps, little things like that where, you saw the blow-bys, you saw those type of things, and it's not easy. If it was easy, Coach Donovan, Billy Donovan would talk about the hardest thing to do is to help him recover. It's one of the hardest things to do in basketball, but being two places at once and then doing it solid. Those are things that this team has to get better at, because from the defensive standpoint, they're going to have to get stops, because when they get stops, that initiates their runs. They're as good as anybody getting out in transition. But when you're not getting stops, Jack, then that causes you to have to run sets and run certain things against length, against athleticism. So the better they are at getting stops defensively, it goes hand in hand in how they're going to play offensively.
Right. And you look at the first Duke game, part of what helped Louisville get out to that lead was the fact they were getting stops. They were getting out in transition.
No doubt.
People talk so much about complementary football. It works absolutely the same way in basketball, too.
Mm-hmm.
Louisville is a much, much better team when they're getting out in transition. And that's, yes, Louisville can do that at times off of made baskets, but it's a lot harder to do if you're having to get the ball out of the net than if you're getting the defensive rebound. And the rebounding's another thing, too. I mean, it was 11-11 at one point last night. The rebounding was, and I believe it was something like, I can pull it up. I had it written down here somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's 48-27 is how it finished in the game.
48-27 is how it finished, but you go from 11-11 to 48-27, and what's that, like 36-15 after that? Something like that. There it is. Yep, exactly. 36-15. Duke out rebounded Louisville the rest of the game. 42-10 in the paint. Those are just stats that can't happen. I mean, and you talk about and this was part of the reason why we thought Louisville would be able to overcome a little bit of the front court issues, even before we saw like Bruce and Pryor not, for various reasons, not perform the way that Louisville's needed them to perform, was you saw the team last year incredibly undermanned, but still become a really good rebounding team, especially on the defensive end, and a really good defensive team. And for whatever reason, I get it mostly completely different cast of characters, all that stuff. Pat Kelsey hasn't been able to get this team to click on that end of the floor, to rotate the way that team did. Yes, obviously it helps when Chucky Hepburn's the best on-ball defender in the country, and Terrence Edwards is pretty damn good at that as well. But they were rebounding despite having to play Noah Waterman a lot of major minutes. So despite, we all loved Drain Smith last year, he was a liability on the defensive end of the floor. You were playing Hadley at the 4 last year. This was still, even against some of the bigger teams they played, maybe some of this was because the ACC was just so bad last year, but we did see, even as an undersized team, against the Clemsons, who was a 4 seed, against Indiana, who was a bad team, but really, really big, against West Virginia, who should have been a tournament team, Louisville could win rock fights of basketball games. They haven't proven they can come anywhere close to doing that this season.
Yeah, Jack, when you take what Chucky Hepburn brought to this team from a defensive standpoint, when you have so much trust in the guard that's not going to get beat, that's going to blow up 72% of the ball screens, it's going to just navigate, be able to get under, over, understands what a guard's trying to do. When you have a guy like that, and his toughness just oozes off into the other players as well, and all of a sudden, Fat Edwards becomes a much better player. You have more of a rim protector than they have this year in James Scott. Then you have some athleticism at the wings and so on, where a guy like Rain Smith can be covered up, in those regards. Obviously, it wasn't something that was going to be sustainable throughout the year, but for the competition that they played, they were a solid defensive team. I think they were cohesive. They understood.
Yeah, they were like top 30 in KenPom last year.
Yeah, no doubt. Look, they dug in. But when you have a guy like again, I can't stress enough that you have a Chucky Hepburn, a TJ McConnell type, who is just going to get after you and make everything difficult for you. Just change the positioning of where you're catching the ball. It makes such a difference on the wing if you catch it a foot and a half away from the spot that you want, where you don't have a post angle to throw it in. Your high-low is blown up. Now it's got to be thrown back out. Now here comes a flat ball screen. And Chucky just ate those type of things up. They just don't have that. And it disrupts, you're not seeing, even like with Duke, it wasn't, look, the first matchup with Foster just being like it downhill and so on. This game, how many times they were able to get the ball to the second, third, fourth side. And when that happens, you're out of, you're scrambling. And what happens? Duke just was able to offensive rebound over and over and over again. And we saw Coach Kelsey get on through about grabbing the basketball. But it's just everybody. It's about everybody hitting a body, understanding that, you just, the worst you can give up is a second shot. The worst thing than that is a third shot. Defending and rebounding. I mean, that's the core of what your essence is, and we're just not seeing that against these teams that have athleticism, where Louisville just can't contain the basketball.
Yeah, I mean, there was a possession in the second half where Frew gave up 2 offensive rebounds to guards.
Mm-hmm.
That can't happen. I mean, there was we've talked about it, just Louisville's inability to stop the ball. I don't think there is a better play to showcase this than Louisville comes out after a made free throw in the second half. They go to their press, they trap initially, then Brown backs off. Hadley then gets beat off the dribble, but Brown doesn't rotate over to cut the dribble
Right.
off. So I forget if it was Foster or Boozer, whoever it was for Duke, gets a free lane into the paint, drives all the way in. Frew tries to step up, and it just becomes a very easy alley oop for Gumbo,
Right.
which like people can go and point and say that's on Frew, whatever. They're like, no, that was Sanandra Frew being put in an absolutely atrocious place because Mikel Brown didn't come over and rotate.
Right.
And
that's what
Hadley
happens
got beat off
in
the
game.
Yeah.
Jack, I can't tell you how many times as a coach in game that, it's the first person, and usually if it's a rebound, you go after your bigs because you're expecting them just to, and sometimes you have guys like that who can rebound out of their area, and you don't have to box out, or car crash is the term I use. Like, you don't have to do that because that guy is just going to go grab 15 to 18 rebounds a game, and you don't have to worry about it. But that's not this team. And then everybody has to do their job. They have to hit a body. It's got to be gang rebounding. They don't have a guy that's just going to go in there and grab 10 to 15 rebounds a game. That's not the makeup of the squad. So you have to have your guards being obsessed with it. And it goes hand in hand with, if you rebound the basketball as a guard, it initiates the break, and they want to play with tempo. And this game was certainly played the way, even in the second half, it reminded me of Coach K's teams where, they have a big lead and they're just walking the ball up and making, you saw Shire. Nope, hold up. We're running our offense, and they're not getting a shot off until 10 seconds. And what happens? It wears out your defense. It wears out, you get second chance opportunities. And you could see the strategy there. They controlled the pace of the game from, that 5 or 6 minute mark in the first half. Early on, it was the game Louisville wanted. You're up and down. Yeah, Duke was making shots, but Louisville's making their shots and going. There were 7 threes in the first 5 minutes. Corey Alexander mentioned, okay, this is going to be just an absolute track meet. And then Duke created the pace and tempo that they wanted. They did not want to play that style. And because they defend so well, it shifted right to the style of play that Duke wanted to have.
And because Louisville couldn't disrupt what Duke was trying to do offensively, Duke was incredibly comfortable on the offensive end throughout that game. And
when you're asking, Jack, and I hate to interrupt you, but when you're asking Conwell to be the guy that's going to be okay, that's our pressure guy. That's our guy. And we've seen that in other games. And you're saying, okay, you've got to be just a hellacious defender off on the ball. But Conwell's different than Chucky from that standpoint because, hey, he's got to get 10 to 15 to 20 shots up. He's going to come down. He's going to work. You're going to work him off. He's going to set the ram screen, then get a fade, then come off a handoff. You're asking so much of him offensively, and it's hard to put him in that position where he's got to be your leader defensively, that he's going to pick up and pressure, where Chucky was able to do that. But you saw, look, whether they got into the ball reversals, they knew they could throw it into certain guys, or Chucky's just going to get a simple Spain action, and it's very simple. I can get downhill, I hit Rain, or I'm going to skip it, or hit James Scott for a lob. You're asking a lot of Conwell at this point because I don't see anybody else on that roster who can just be that hellacious on-the-ball defender.
Which is why when Mikel Brown was out for so long, it was the offense will mostly fix itself, which it did look a lot better against Virginia Tech. Monday night, obviously different circumstances, but Mikel Brown wasn't going to come back and fix all that defensively for you. He wasn't. The only thing I could say is he could take some of that pressure off of Conwell to where he doesn't have to do as much on the offensive end. You're still going to ask a lot out of him to be really one of your main scorers. But when Brown has a night like he did on Monday night where he's 1 for 13, which I saw on ESPN's bottom line was that 7% field goal percentage. That's the worst shooting night a Louisville players had where they've taken 12 or more shots since 2000. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, like it was it was an awful game for Mikel Brown. There's no way to get around it. It was worse than even the Kansas game. What were some of the struggles you saw from him especially on the offensive end? We've talked about it a lot already. He really struggled trying to finish over the length. The fact that Duke wasn't respecting the bigs, really let them focus in on him. But what else did you see from him? Because that's a big thing of why did the offense struggle so much with him back? Because that was, by my own admission, supposed to fix a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, and I think they're really effective. Again, it's part of the flow. I think he's really effective in middle ball screens, and especially with Frew when you have shooters spaced out on the floor where he has more room to operate, Jack, and that wasn't the case in this game. And so he's a very great and he's really really good in the open floor in a lot of ways. Number one, his vision's tremendous. When he's going against when guys are scrambling to get back on defense and he can get the ball, his head's up, pitch ahead, get it back, drive against a mismatch, or attack a defense that's not set and get downhill and either get to the rim, pull up, and so on, he's really effective. When you're going against a set defense, he's bumped at times, and he not from a selfish standpoint, but yeah, he's taken some shots. We saw that in the second half off of a timeout. He takes a really tough contested three. We see Coach Kelsey kind of apoplectic. It's almost like he's trying to will his team back and trying to make and be and for lack of a better way of putting it, hero ball. And I don't think he's selfish. I just think he's trying to get those shots off. And so sometimes it's where that ball just sticks, and it's where he's not getting a lot of movement. He's trying to do some dribble moves, and it's coming into a contested shot. Where he's really effective, Jack, is when they're getting out in the open floor. And that's the style that Coach Kelsey, I'm sure, preached. Hey, this is the way we're going to play. This is great for you. Here's a random ball screen. Here's a chance for you to go downhill. Here's a chance to pitch ahead, get it back. We are playing fast, and we're playing quick, and we're understanding that. And right now, the biggest thing is when you miss that time, Jack, getting back into the half court and getting back into those rhythms and understanding, hey, that ball is going to get back to you. Sometimes that trust isn't there where it needs to be, where that ball stays with you that at split second more, and the ball sticks, and you're trying to do too much one-on-one. And we saw that in the second half, where he's just trying to hunt for his shots. And that was going to affect, now you're displaced defensively, and that's what leads to Duke getting some baskets as well as they're scrambling. So for Mikel, it's all a process. He's a tremendously talented young man. I'd love to see him go off 2 feet when he gets in the lane. He likes to go off 1 foot, and that kind of rushes that decision. Where off 2 feet, he's able to either rondo or kick it out, or with his length, shoot a little floater, or see if guys are going to trap him because he has such great vision. But when you go off 1 foot like he does, hey, it's time to make a shot because you only have a split second. So I think it's just a matter of, those all things just came together. And I think with Duke's defense, it just made it such tough treading for him throughout the game.
Yeah, I do think a lot of it too comes back to when you're not getting stops defensively, that's going to put you in a much worse situation on the offensive end.
Yeah, the last thing they want to do is just walk the ball up and run a set and so on. They want to get out and play. And you've heard Coach Kelsey talk about, hey, we want to hoop. And for him, that mindset is getting up and down. Those games are in the 80s and the 90s, and we just haven't seen that against teams that are long, athletic, and that's the issue. Now, is that something that can be adjusted this year? I don't know. You got to look at your roster sometimes and say, okay, sometimes these guys just don't fit. It didn't work. It happens, right? We saw that with Louisville football with, Miller Moss. It just wasn't the right fit. So sometimes those things happen. This is the new age of college sports where you've got to say, okay, we've got to be our due diligence and find those pieces that are going to fit to the style that we want.
Do you think that's where they're at right now? That it's just, well, we're not good enough against these top level teams and we just kind of have to sit in it?
Well, I think we might be. I'm not ready to say that they can't beat some of those teams, but it's going to have to be nights where they defensively, they really dig in. And that's something that can be controlled. You just mentioned that, Jack. If they defend better and from a standpoint of they can just get stops and get out and run, that's a style they need to play. If they're going to have to bring the ball up and there's made baskets or team are shooting free throws, that's not what they want. So, and look, we're still in January. You've got a month where, okay, where you can light a fire to a Fru, to Khalifa. Hey, you've got to be a much better defender. And then lastly, I'll say you see what Sarr does. He scored 2 points in 27 minutes, but his impact on the game is tremendous. We saw that in game one.
In both games, yeah.
No doubt. So why, for me, I'm pulling Kenai Roots aside and saying, we don't care about your scoring. Don't look to hunt for shots. You can affect so many things. There's guys that play a long time in the professional leagues and have great careers and make lots of money because they can get stops. And for him, with his length and athleticism, he should be that guy. All of a sudden you got Evans going off, or you even got even with Cam Boozer. Okay, physically, let's just work, make everything tough for him. If he can morph into that guy, where defensively and with his athleticism, now you get out in sprint zones and you just get out and go. And Mikel can pitch it ahead to you. You can rim run. I think he could be an X factor for how they can, not so much of an adjustment, but to your question, they're stagnant and they can improve. Maybe he could be a guy that's such a defensive force that's going to cause turnovers, help this team get out and run and play faster.
Yeah, you mentioned Sarr and Duke. I'd throw Mikel Brown in there as well as a dude that can just impact the game in so many ways and probably not score or have a bucket or two. But
you'd hope that they'd have Kason Pryor and Roos at this point. Yeah. But it just
that's what Pryor was supposed to be.
Exactly right.
And he just hasn't done that at this point. But for me, yes, that there's still time, obviously, but you're going to need you mentioned it with Fru and Khalifa and Roos. I would pivot and say almost as important, you got to challenge Conwell and Brown and McNeely and Woolley and say, look, dudes, we don't have Gorgie Jang or Montrezl Harrell back there to clean up these mistakes. You have to go out there, pressure the ball, disrupt the offense, make it tough for them to get the ball down there and not get beat off the dribble.
No doubt.
For me, how do you mask Louisville's front line issues? It comes down to the backcourt needs to do their job and not put an already, iffy front court in bad positions over and over and over again. And whether that's staying in front of your man, making post passes hard, because you're going to play North Carolina in a couple of weeks. And Vasar, Caleb Wilson, I mean, even if Roos comes back and becomes this Malik Brown, Sarr type guy, Caleb Wilson's going to be a top 5 pick in the draft. Vasar is one of the best 5 men in the country. Louisville's front line just straight up is not stopping North Carolina. You need the other dudes to make it to where they can't get the ball. You need it to where it's not just Roos and Fru and Khalifa and Zugris straight up against Vasar and Caleb Wilson. You need the other guys to insert themselves into that matchup, even if they're not doing it directly.
North Carolina's as good as anybody at high lows, and and they just do such a great job of lifting all their offensive players and trying to get into that. But again, it starts with, okay, who's going to take the onus of just pressuring the basketball? And we said it last podcast, your best post defender is ball pressure and not letting good looks. But that's the fallacy of where they are right now, because when they extend their pressure and they're crowding ball, the ball handler, he's able to get by him. And you've got to have, from a technical standpoint, catching their moves. And what I mean by that is, you're watching, you understand, you're forcing him to his right, to left, to the baseline, funneling him in certain directions where you can get low and beat him to that spot, not let him get to a third dribble. Those are things where he's got to spin or pick it up. Those are things where Louisville's just going to have to engage. And hopefully Kenai Roos is a guy that comes in and says, you know what, I'm the elixir to some of these defensive issues that we have, and I can come in and help. And then everybody's on board with that, because if they don't defend better, they're going to be in the same position over and over again. It's just going to be what we're seeing like we did last night.
It goes against everything I think we've talked about on this podcast for 3 years now. And I don't think this is the answer, but to appease the masses, I'm going to ask this question. Not to say like should they go zone, because I think it's pretty clearly they're not going to go zone. But should they, because what you mentioned with, yes, you can pressure the ball, but if you just get beat off the dribble, that doesn't really accomplish anything. Would you play a little bit more of I don't want to say sagging off, but like less ball pressure, but you're making sure you're staying in front of your guy no matter what, just making that the number one thing, going to Mikel Brown and say, look, we're gonna go under screens, we're gonna play drop coverage, we're gonna play really conservatively, and we're going to make them just shoot over us type of
Yeah,
deal.
it's tough when you're going against, like, look, you saw with Virginia when you're talking about wings that are 6'5", 6'6", 6'7". Same thing with Duke. If you're sloughing off and you're basically giving room, it's almost to the point where you might as well just sit in the paint because that's not going to be effective. So, especially against bigger guys, you really have to get up in them. You've got to make them take negative steps and turn and be uncomfortable and change the angle of that pass where maybe it's 1 or 2 inches lower or higher, and that gives your post guys a chance to recover and shift positions and so on. And then move guys 3 inches when you're in the post and really front. And look, when they switch, you see Conwell and even McNeely. When they do that, they're decent post defenders and so on. There's got to be different things that you have to do, but it's a concerted effort. It's a situation where every time that either there's a blow by, there's someone getting beat, it's like there's so much pride that you have to have on the defensive end, Jack. And that's something I would always preach to my teams: the pride that you have, even just them getting by you or a post touch or whatever. But I don't think the answer is playing off. I think it's even extending that pressure and getting guys over. And bad things happen when the ball is in flight if you're not moving. So force skips and fades, but recover back. And what we talked about earlier, close out, contest, make them shoot a tough three or a tough two, but you can't allow them to blow by you. And like I said, that's one of the toughest things to do in this game of basketball. But remember this, Jack, it's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be, you're going against really, really good teams. It's hard to defend, but you've got to absolutely dig in. And you've got to have if you have one guy who's not engaged, Jack, it defeats everything. So it really is a matter. I think Coach Kelsey's a hell of a coach. I think these guys are bought in, but it's just got to be a matter of where defensive pride against the more athletic teams is just the mantra. And they just are saying, you know what, we are going to dig in, and we're saying not tonight. We are staying. You're not getting where you need to be. We are locked in, and we are not. We're not giving in any way, shape, or form. Plant your feet, stand firm, and make a point about who you are defensively.
Yeah, and I felt like I had to ask that question just because I've seen so much off of
the
Twitter
zone.
and text of like wanting the zone, wanting that stuff, and it's like if we're sitting here on January 27th, we haven't seen a zone by this point. We're probably not seeing one, guys.
Well, I would say this: I'm a big believer that you could throw in a junk zone out of a timeout and throw in a couple possessions of a zone. And we talked about Duke did it early on. I think someone mentioned that they threw a 1-3-1 against Virginia Tech for a possession. I did not.
I didn't
see all the game.
I could have missed it, but
yeah. But regardless, can you do that? Sure. Out of a timeout, I'm big on running, and I don't want to give away all my trade secrets, but running a zone where we're going to have a quick trap, and certainly teams are running stuff. And I like to do it not when you're down, but when you're up. And you know what? And say, okay, this is something that they're going to have to figure out. And it takes the shot clock. Or extending their pressure, even if it's a 2-2-1 back to a man. Or their full court pressure and trapping like they were doing earlier. They did that a lot with Case and Pryor. They've gotten away from it. But you certainly
I would like to see more of it. I like that 1-2-1-1. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. You just can't live in your fears. You got to do something that's going to disrupt what teams are doing. You just can't let them come down and be comfortable, like you said.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how this goes the rest of the season. Obviously, we got to get out of here, but I just want to get quick thoughts. SMU.
Before you say that, Jack,
yeah.
I'm going to wow you with Ken Baum with a Ken Baum stat that he only has Louisville losing 2 more games along the way. So
really, is it Carolina?
I got to pull it up on my now. I'm not the most.
I got to pull it up. I got to pull it up.
So it's. I'd have to pull up on my phone, and I don't want to do that right now.
It's at Carolina and at Clemson.
Well, so there you go. So that's a situation where, but again, is that enough to put them, in a top 4 or 5 seed and so on, where they're not, and I don't think so either. So look, they've got a chance and an opportunity. I think SMU is really good offensively. They have some issues defensively, but that's not the problem right now for this Louisville team. They're going to have to get stops against SMU, and they're going to really have to dig in and play what we just talked about and have some pride on the defensive end.
Yeah, and this is a quad 1A game too, which Louisville does not have a quad 1A win. So while it's not going to have the cachet as a win over Duke or if you go and beat Carolina or some of these other games, Arkansas, Tennessee, that they've lost,
right?
If Louisville's able to get this one I mean, we just asked the question, if they do what they need to do the rest of the year, if
Uh-huh.
they go by that Ken Pom projection, is that enough to get a 4 or 5 seed? Probably not. But this is a game. This is one of the biggest games Louisville has the rest of the regular season
No doubt.
as far as trying to help out the resume. So very imperative that Louisville finds a way to bounce back and get a win over a team that, like you said, really good offensively. Love watching Boopy Miller. Could be a lot of points on Saturday.
Oh, it's going to be a lot of points. I agree with that. But for Louisville standpoint, they've got to do it from a defensive standpoint. It's almost like, yeah, they want to play in the 80s and 90s, and they want to win 92, 86. But it's almost to the point where you're saying, this team, Duke shooting 51% and so on. This team's got to shoot under 40%. This team's got to be ready. We're getting some kills. We're getting some stops. It's almost like, as much as they preach how fast they want to play, this is almost this whole week has got to be where a mindset is defensively. We have to be the bully. We've got to be the team that's going to get stops. It's going to just be the tougher tougher on the floor on the defensive end and rebound the basketball.
And we've seen Louisville respond a couple times, mostly the Indiana game on that, but Indiana doesn't have a guy like Boopy Miller that can really beat you off the dribble in the same way.
Not the most, Indiana's good.
No, they're not
the most athletic. Well, they're good. I didn't say they're great. They're a good team. They're just not athletic enough to withstand what they've got to face. So yeah, and this is a game where Louisville, this would mean something. This would be a nice win for them for sure.
Yep. So we'll see if they can pull through on Saturday, trying to bounce back from what was a pretty ugly night in Cameron Indoor on Monday night. That's all we got for today. For Coach Lieberman, I'm Jack Gross.